Are you aware of any resources that inform you of the strength curve of a given muscle? Google. You can just Google, like, does the chest have an ascending or descending strength curve? And you'll get usually a correct answer. So, I mean, the vast majority of muscles are going to have an ascending strength curve, meaning that as you get closer to lockout, to the joint being fully extended, you are going to get stronger. So like you can quarter squat more than you can full squat, and you can, quarter tricep extension more than you can full tricep extension. There are a few muscles that are exceptions, and these are usually muscles that are bent when fully short. So like the hamstrings, any muscles in the back, and then actually the calves as well have a descending strength curve. What's the highest body fat that you would let a natural get up to before any additional weight gain becomes a higher percentage of fat? So my man, I literally made a 15-minute video about this. You can go on my YouTube. It's in the deep dive playlist. It's called Why Bulking Looks Very Different, Natural versus Enhanced. And the basic gist of the video, at least on the one question that you have here, is that there isn't a lot of evidence that naturals are actually affected by a worse P ratio when they're fat. So my answer would be, when you have basically induced pre-diabetes and you have a fasted blood glucose over 100 milligrams per deciliter. What is the evidence that higher rep ranges lead to less injury? So as far as I know, there isn't going to be like hard evidence in the literature for like sets of 20 being less injurious than sets of 8. We do have some evidence basically taken from powerlifting meets that like very high intensities in a competition setting lead to significantly increased injury rates, but that has its whole host of confounding variables. Like, people actually miss attempts in powerlifting meets. It's competitive. They can't, like, if their back is tweaked, they can't wait till the next day. The meet is that day and they got to compete that day. So with that said, I think there's some common sense that applies here. Again, with the common sense factor, we know that for anybody knows that's trained any length of time, that weights that are lower hurt your joints less. Now, does that mean that there's a relationship there between traumatic injuries, or is that simply relief for like chronic tendonitis type issues? I couldn't say for sure, but again, we know from many lifters that as they've gotten older and more injury prone, they've turned to using higher reps and have seemed to do a better job of avoiding injuries versus when they were younger and able to get away with heavier absolute loading. Now, that said, there's one other thing that I would like to talk about that I haven't heard a lot of other people talk about, and that is the relationship between absolute load and traumatic injuries. So I'm not talking about relative intensity versus your 1 rep max. What I'm talking about is that in my experience, you will start to see pecs being blown once somebody gets over, for example, like a 405 bench. The risk becomes exponentially higher, regardless of what their strength is. You will see these types of absolute loading thresholds on other movements as well, and if you look closely at pro bodybuilders, you'll often recognize the patterns of what I'm saying. Very few of them will exceed certain weights. After a certain point, they'll just start making it harder versus adding more and more load. For example, another absolute loading threshold that I've seen, like when you get to like 6, 7, 8 plates on a hack squat, people's knees just get destroyed unless they start using a super slow eccentric, pauses, or even knee wraps. So that's just another example. So I personally believe that once you get really strong, you're dealing with absolute loads that are so high that your risk is high. So by using a higher rep range, you step below those load thresholds. What are your recommended supplements for natty lifters? So really the only one is creatine, literally the only one. I don't even recommend caffeine. Like if you like to train on caffeine because it makes your sessions more fun and all that, cool. But it probably has negative impacts on your sleep unless you're keeping it at 3 milligrams per kilo of body weight and at least 8 hours before bed. Otherwise, probably a net negative because of the sleep impacts. So that said, I think the number one supplement that natties can take is to make an account on Chronometer and make sure that you are hitting your micronutrient minimums. Otherwise, the rest of the beneficial supplements are really only beneficial because you have a nutritional deficiency. Can wrist wraps help with wrist pain on pressing exercises? What size should I get? Yeah, dude, literally that's what they're for. They 100% can help with that. And it's less important, like the length of the wrist wraps that you get, although I would probably stick to short or medium if it's your first pair, but it's much more important that you get flexible wrist wraps. Don't get a stiff wrist wrap like the original red SBD wrist wraps. I've had the same wrist wraps for 10 years. They're called Titan RPMs, but you just want to get any flexible wrist wrap. That's the key. What are some make or breaks that people need to consider before trying to work in the fitness industry? I think the fitness industry is a place for people who are exceptional in some way or another, right? You either have to be like so hot in your face and your body that you can get thousands of followers just from like posting a picture of you flexing, or you need to be an amazing powerlifter, strongman, bodybuilder, or you have to be a straight fucking hustler. Because generally speaking, nobody's really going to pay you what you're worth. You have to go out and earn clients through marketing, whether you're a personal trainer, whether you're an influencer. If you're going to make it without basically being born with exceptional gifts, you're going to have to outwork everybody else. And if that's not the kind of thing you want, if you want a 40-hour per week job at a stable company with benefits, don't get in the fitness industry, man. But if it's your dream, then why would you do anything else? So just make sure the passion is there and make sure you're ready to hustle, because you're going to have to, unless you want to make relatively meager money. What would you change about your training and nutrition if your goal was to just maximize general health? People always ask me this, and then they're surprised when I say I would not train anymore. The number one thing that I could do for my health is get my body weight back down to like 150 pounds ASAP. Lifting doesn't help. But what about all the research that shows strength training improves longevity and blah, blah, blah? Yeah, but you guys have to understand that research is done primarily on relatively untrained, sedentary individuals. If I quit training and did at least something active, like let's say I went and started to train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, this is actually what my plan is. I'm going to be stronger than the vast majority of the people on the planet, even without ever lifting another weight again in my entire life. Because hypertrophy is a persistent adaptation, and it really doesn't take that much to maintain a lot of it. In fact, I was 180 pounds in high school after working out for 6 months. By me doing anything active, I'm going to maintain a great level of strength and muscularity to be healthy. Now, that might change as I become elderly. I might have to do 2 or 3 sessions a week, but that's it. One of the most underrated aspects of general health is happiness. And so what I would do is I would immediately become more social in every single area of my life. I would make sure that I'm doing 4 to 5 cardio sessions a week at 30 to 45 minutes, but I would do it via activities that I'm doing with other people, whether that's something like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or pickleball or swimming or going on a bike ride or a hike with somebody. I would be doing things with other people. I would be eating out more with other people and just making healthy choices. I would have a much wider variety of food, but I would stop weighing things and I would stop tracking things, and I would generally just try to focus on micronutrient dense satiating foods. Health is happiness, man. Is hypertrophy training generally better preparation for contact sports than powerlifting? Yes, it is, but man, if you're trying to prepare for a contact sport, why don't you just do a strength and conditioning program that's actually specific to the sport? Because that's going to work way better than a general hypertrophy program or a powerlifting program. That said, hypertrophy is 100% for sure better because hypertrophy is more general than the 1 RM strength on squat, bench, and deadlift, which is fairly specific, especially with these sort of extreme powerlifting techniques like wide grip, arch back bench press, and sumo deadlifts. Full range of motion hypertrophy training is going to better prepare you for the extreme positions that sports often put you in. It's going to get you strong in those positions so you don't get injured. And again, muscle mass in general is more general of an adaptation than 1 RM strength, so you're just going to get better carryover to a larger variety of tasks than you do with the sport of powerlifting. What is the best intra-workout carb powder? So personally, I use cluster dextrin, which is highly branched cyclic dextrin, because it is the one that impacts my digestion the least. Some of the cheaper carb powders literally leave me feeling like there is a huge bomb in my gut, and I hate that feeling while I'm working out. What are the benefits of short biased work over mid-range and lengthened biased work? Are there any? So on a set per set basis, an exercise that has a short biased strength curve is going to be easier to recover from than one that has a lengthened biased strength curve. It's going to create less eccentric damage, especially in that stretch position, and thus it'll be easier to recover from. So if you can't recover from another additional set of a super stretched lengthened biased movement, you might still be able to add a short biased set and get some additional stimulus that still fits within your fatigue budget. But other than that, man, it's just going to potentially train some different fibers maximally versus a lengthened biased movement. Are muscles stronger when they're short, or is it just because joints are stacking? Yeah, this is an insightful and important question because it's actually extremely difficult to separate the strength curve of a muscle from a given movement that we're talking about. Not only is it really difficult to separate the strength curve of a muscle from the movement that you're doing, I'm not really sure it's important that we do. Because at the end of the day, we cannot train muscles without doing specific movements. And when we take into consideration the strength curve of a specific movement, we can make choices based on that. So, for example, when training the quads, even though most quad movements have an ascending strength curve, in my experience, leg extensions are not one of those movements. Leg extensions train the short position, the joints do not stack, and they are hardest at lockout. So we can treat leg extensions as a short bias movement. So whatever adjustments that we want to make when doing a short bias movement, whether that's lengthened partials or attempting to find a machine that has a lengthened bias strength curve to smooth out some of the difference, the main ones that you need to be aware of are going to be leg curl variations, pretty much any calf raise, pretty much all back work, pull downs, pullovers, rows, and even most rear delt variations as well. Machine chest flies tend to benefit from a lengthened bias strength curve on the machine, or they can be great for lengthened partials as well. So those are the main ones that I would say people should keep an eye out for in terms of having muscle versus movement strength curves that end up being short biased. Keep in mind, guys, that this is very advanced stuff, and a lot of you don't need to worry about this like literally at all. You just need to double the weight on the movements that you're currently doing before this even becomes a factor in how well you can progress. I'm serious. You don't have to worry about this with a 180 row. You just don't. My man, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So my least favorite part of getting back full-time into like content creation and coaching is advertising. But the bottom line is that advertising is super important and super effective. Like, you literally get 20 times, 50 times the inquiries when you advertise coaching openings versus when you just let them trickle in. So let's go ahead and do that one more time to end today's Q&A. I have set up a Patreon for anybody that wants to go ahead and support the Q&A. It's $1 a month. People asked me to set one up so that they could show their support, so that's what I've done. If you'd like to do that, much appreciated. No worries if you don't. Just keep asking questions and tuning in. That said, I also do still have coaching openings available, and as a reminder, I have dropped my prices in half temporarily until my initial roster is full. So if you've ever thought about working with me in the past, now is the best time to do it, since it's literally half of what it usually is. Anyways, thanks for the questions today, everybody. Until next time, peace. All right, YouTube, you know what to do. If you like the video. Questions and comments in the comment section below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and have a wonderful day.